So people are starting to get more bullish on Brazil now that Lula's popularity is dropping. But I'm not, and today I will explain to you why. But first, why is Lula's popularity in free fall something good? Because you see, Lula's administration has been spending like crazy. Public spending is at record highs, which has caused inflation to go up, which, as a consequence, made interest rates go up as well. Now, just for you guys to have an idea, interest rates in Brazil are currently sitting at 13.25%, which is really high, and even so, they are expected to continue going up. So, as you can imagine, the Brazilian economy is not in its best shape. It has been hit really hard. The good thing about this terrible economic environment Brazil is going through is that now that the costs of Lula's administration are obvious, now that, for instance, everything is way more expensive, from clothes to rent, and especially food, now that things are undeniably bad, people are finally starting to turn their opinion about the government. Amen. So, what people who are optimistic about Brazil think is, well, if Lula's approval rate is dropping, this means that he probably won't win next year's election. And while that makes sense, I don't think that's obviously the case. Because you see, you can say whatever you want about Lula, but the fact is that this guy shouldn't be underestimated. Really, this guy came from nowhere, became president, was re-elected, then he was convicted, went to jail, and even so managed to get elected for the third time. My point is, though Lula's popularity is currently low, I wouldn't be surprised at all if he managed to turn the game around. Because you see, Brazilian people also tend to forget things quickly. I know many will get offended by that, but it's true, really. As I've said, even though Lula went to jail, even though Lula was convicted, people still voted massively for him, and many still worship him as a kind of Robin Hood, as the father of the poor. Besides, and maybe the most important, is the fact that there's simply no serious political opposition. Really, no one besides Bolsonaro, Brazil's last president, is capable of defeating Lula. Lula is really popular, and he's a really experienced politician. Additionally, guess what? Bolsonaro is also ineligible and might even face jail. So even though Lula's popularity is suffering, which political figure could stand as a serious opposition? I don't think there's one. So even though many are tired of Lula, he might still win the majority of votes, gaining the next election again. My point is, there's still a long way to go before we can say that the economic scenario in Brazil will improve, you know? Especially because if Lula's popularity is going down, guess what he's going to do before the election? Increase public spending, which, yes, will probably have the short-term effect of boosting his popularity, but on the other hand, will only make Brazil's current economic crisis worse, because that's Brazil's main economic problem, massive public spending. So, at least in my opinion, things just seem far from an actual improvement. Actually, even if Lula doesn't get re-elected, what I feel living here in Brazil is that there is no genuine political will to improve things. There is no political incentive to, for instance, cut government spending or political privileges, which would do a lot for this country and its economy. Actually, if one thing's for sure, is that public spending will continue high, which in the end will result in our currency being depreciated, which in turn will make inflation and interest rates go higher. So even without Lula, this seems to be Brazil's prospect. Really, my impression is that Brazil needs to feel the pain of another hyperinflation wave so people can learn that this interventionist economic model we've been pursuing for decades is not the way to go. So that's why I'm not bullish on Brazil. It's true that Brazilian stocks, for instance, are dirty cheap, no matter what metric you look at. But they are cheap in Brazilian reais, and most Brazilian companies listed out there depend heavily on the Brazilian real, on the Brazilian currency. So as I believe currency devaluation is what awaits Brazil, if that actually happens, things will just get worse for most Brazilian businesses, no matter how shiny they might seem to be now. So if the Brazilian real keeps depreciating in the long run, the prices of these stocks will probably go down in dollar terms. So that's why I'm not going long on Brazilian stocks, even though most of them are very cheap. Because for me, the risk of currency devaluation is still too big. Government spending keeps growing, the debt keeps growing too. So at some point, currency devaluation will happen, almost like divine punishment. So in summary, for me to get really interested on Brazilian stocks, they would need to be trading at much lower levels. And lastly, I'm not buying Brazilian stocks, at least for now, because I'm already exposed in flesh and bone to Brazil's risk, since I live here. Besides, I'm planning to leave Brazil and move to Uruguay. And I'm from the principle that if I want to pull myself out of here, from Brazil, it kind of doesn't make sense to leave my money here. So either Brazilian stocks drop even more, giving me a much higher return for the risk, or I just prefer to look at other markets, especially since there are plenty of cheap opportunities out there. Anyway, the valuation of Brazilian stocks is indeed very tempting, but for now, I choose to stay out. Well, that's it for today, and see you next time.